can I get a mic or a mic and a half? That's the source, oh, my shout out to the editor staff. Yeah, I'm all grown, so much better with math. I need a spread in the Forbes, tipping the Benjamin Bath. Yeah, I'm serving this track like Steffi Graf. Yeah, Roger Federer, there's no competitor.
Urban Tennis, episode 17, Melburned. Welcome back to the podcast. We're recording this right after Serena Williams has shockingly lost to Anna Ivanovic in the fourth round. Another year without an Australian Open title, but more on that later. I'm going to bring in my co-host. Co-host, say hi.
How do you do? I think you're going to have trouble containing me today. I'm pretty hyped after that match.
It was definitely a great match. We'll be talking about that match, but we'll be also talking about the heat in Melbourne. That's been the story much of week one. We'll talk about the other disappointments and the other surprises, and look ahead at week two, plus our selection of games and our social media highlight of the week. So if you're ready, this week's podcast starts right now. This week, Melbourne experienced extreme heat like we haven't seen at the Australian Open for many years. 4 straight days of 100 degrees plus. And on Thursday, finally the tournament officials broke and we had the enforcement of the extreme heat policy. And if those of you who are not familiar with that, that's when the referee, with their sole discretion, is able to stop all matches on outside courts and on the main courts, close all the roofs, and then resume play. But this happened only after players on Tuesday and Wednesday were throwing up, were basically, very dizzy, fainting. Ice vests needed to be used. Ice packs needed to be used. And there was a lot of criticism. So I want to bring in our co-host tonight. Do you think the players were fair in critiquing the Australian Open officials in their ability to control this heat crisis?
I think they were fair, but I'm going to play devil's advocate first, because I do remember an Australian Open official was interviewed on ESPN, and he made a valid point that if they did start suspending matches earlier, then there'd be a critique about that the officials are messing up the players' flow in the match. They're messing up their mindset by just suspending too many matches that way. So not giving them a chance to finish a match that they may be up in and suspending it, and they come back and they may end up losing. So it's a slippery slope either way, I'm saying. So there's not a lot of options when you're dealing with Australia in January, which could lead to my next point.
Yeah, but why leave it up to the players? I know the players, they really don't have any formalized union, and we could talk about the fact that why don't they have one. But I think if the extreme heat policy is put in place, it should stop. It should be like rain. When rain falls, the game stops. Okay? I understand, you want to push it to the end of the set, but say one player's on the verge of, breaking, dehydration, lightheadedness. That's just not fair, okay? I think you just end it at that point. I think those are just officials trying to cover their backs and just kind of, make the best of the situation. It's not, they were planning in advance. There's more a defensive tactic on their part than anything that seems very rational.
Well, yeah, but then heat's also different than rain. Heat's not going to stop. Once heat's going, it's going to go for the entire day. So that means you're not going to play any more tennis on the outside course the rest of the day. When it rains, rain might pass, and then you're going to get tennis back on those courts eventually, unless it's like a super flood or something.
Yeah, it's fair enough. But then you also saw that on Thursday, play didn't resume until 6. There was a rain delay, 2 hour rain delay, and play was going on until 2 a.m. Melbourne's kind of different that way. It's almost like an extended summer break there. People are just going in and out. Crowds don't really suffer. I think it could advantage crowds if they, just play after 6 o'clock. I don't think it'll hurt the tournament at all. Players will play later in the night, but they'll play under better conditions.
Yeah, that is a valid point. I mean, a lot of people point to the first place. Why is this tournament in January? It's ridiculously hot. It's just a couple of weeks into the season. Not a lot of players are physically ready. So the big defense is that, okay, we want to make sure it's during a time when Australians have holidays. So by making it holidays, they get the advantage of, okay, you can start later and still avoid these heat problems.
The great issue of commerce over common sense. Talking about the extreme heat policy, do you have any personal ways of changing it so it works better, or do you like it in its current form?
Well, they've already taken the most important step. They have 2 retractable roof stadiums. They were the first Grand Slam to do that by far, by a wide margin. I think by like 10 or 12 years or something. So they've done that. The only other option they have is, I don't know, look at what Qatar is doing for their World Cup. Seal their stadium technology and air condition their outdoor court somehow.
Okay, so that's infrastructure, but what about enforcing the rule that's already in the women's game where after the second set, there's a 10-minute mandatory rest? Do you think if they apply that to the men's game, that's a kind of a way to please people? Do you think that works? Or do you think there should be more drastic action, like just if there's weather reaches some certain threshold, play is stopped until sundown kind of thing?
Actually, I do like the former suggestion. I mean, it's a change in the game, but it's not a radical departure in the game. I think people who are in North America who know when hockey is played outdoors, they do take 10-minute breaks in the period that they don't when they play indoors. Yeah. So changes in the game do happen depending on the conditions. I mean, tennis is an outdoor game, right?
And it's sort of ridiculous that it exists in the women's game, but doesn't exist in the men's game. So take that men are stronger than women argument, throw that out the window. I think it should be even for both sides. But luckily for Melbourne and the Australian Open, heat doesn't seem to be a factor in the second week, so I think things will return to normal. Let's move on to topic 2.
Well, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we saw a huge upset when Serena Williams lost to Anna Ivanovic for the first time in her career. But this has been a tournament that's already had a good amount of top players fall out. This week, we had Juan Martin Del Potro and Petra Kvitova, 2 perennial Grand Slam dark horses. So do you think at this point, are they really Grand Slam contenders at this point, or just dangerous floaters?
I still think they're Grand Slam contenders. A lot of people were putting their faith in Del Potro. Del Potro hasn't played well in Australia ever in his career, so maybe that was premature. But I still think, maybe we have to make sure he's a contender on certain slams and not all slams. I think maybe that's a caveat we have to use. But if we go to New York, if we go to Wimbledon, I still think he's one of the 4, maybe 5 contenders, at most 6 best contenders. So I don't think he's, one of those maybe shot kind of guys who are can pull off the upset and then fizzle. I still think he's a good contender. In terms of Kvitova, she's so talented that you always hope that she's going to form into a Grand Slam contender. I think tennis will be better if she's a Grand Slam contender. But I do think at this point that you have to consider her a dangerous floater. Even though she's young, I still think her game is more of a dangerous floater type.
Yeah, but I'm thinking I'm going to have to say, I know I hate referring to age. I mean, this is a tournament. This is a game which is stretching age longer than it has at any point in time. But Del Potro is also going to be 26 this year. So he's not when's that opportunity going to come where he's going to consistently win a Grand Slam every year like people expected from him back in 2009? How many more chances does he need to break through?
Yeah, I don't see him having a lot more chances, but I do see him having at least a couple. The definition of chances in your sense maybe just of Grand Slam final, but I think Grand Slam semifinals he'll be there. So I do think he'll have more chances than less. Bringing back Serena, do you think Serena was a disappointment this week or just, something that's part of the game?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately couldn't catch the entire match, but I do remember watching the third set. I think Anna Ivanovic played probably the best tennis she has since she was number 1. When Serena Williams was serving, she blanked her. I mean, she prevented her from getting no points on her serve during one game. So Anna Ivanovic was playing probably the match of her life. Serena Williams playing average, so I think that's more in line with that's just tennis. So I think it was a combination of 2 factors, and that's why Serena Williams was knocked out by Anna Ivanovic.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it was more, there's reports coming out right now. I think it's 25 minutes removed from the match that Serena had aggravated her back between round 2 and round 3. Her coach is reporting that. But I think it's a fact. It's very comparable to what happened at Wimbledon. Serena was never her best, But, often how can you refer to somebody as best if they lose a match? That's kind of a different thing. But in terms of Lazicki and Ivanovic, they were reckless. They were fearless on the return game, and their serves held up well enough. Ivanovic didn't face a breakpoint opportunity from the end of the first set all the way to the end. And this is someone whose first serve has been extremely shaky for many years. Has probably held her back. So I think it was a combination of the two. I don't think it's a failure. I think it's a failure in the sense that she didn't win a Grand Slam, but not a failure in terms of she kind of, had a terrible performance.
Plus, what do you think about all the tall players dropping out of this tournament so quickly?
Yeah, that's pretty strange. Isner, Janovic, Raonic. We talked about Del Potro. It could be a combination of heat. It could be just a combination of many things. It could be just a bad year for those players. But that was definitely something strange that happened in week 1.
Well, I think I have to review my grade 10 science notes, but it may have to do something with the larger player bodies' convection levels in their body, so maybe they can't handle heat as well. But that's just a theory. Please don't quote me on a Scientific America.
Okay, so that's the hypothesis of this podcast. As there are failures, there's always surprises, and it always seems like on the women's side, there's that darling that rises, that surprise person that makes the run. And I feel this year, I think it's Genie Bouchard of Canada, who's in the 4th round, will be facing Casey Delacqua of Australia. But do you think she fits all the requirements of the up-and-comer rising star who has their breakout performance in a slam? And do you think Genie Bouchard is currently experiencing that?
Well, I'm going to look at more the marketability side first. I think we've already seen that a lot of big Australian fans coming out, #Genie's Army, supporting this Canadian. So that's really, really big news. And I think one of the reasons is that we've heard things about Baby Fed, otherwise known as Grigor Dimitrov, and how he resembles Roger Federer. But I also think, I'm not saying Genie Bouchard resembles Maria Sharapova, but like in terms of being a younger player on the tournament, having some success, why can't she be like a similar equivalent to a baby Shaza?
Yeah, the comparisons with Maria Sharapova are obviously easy to make. Bouchard has looked up to Sharapova. There's that great picture on the internet that I think Bouchard released of them taking a picture together nearly 10, 12 years ago. I think Bouchard does fill the criteria. I almost think she needs that one more victory, that quarterfinal appearance. But the fact that her end of 2013 was so impressive and that she came in ranked for the first time, she fits the criteria of being kind of that legitimate rising star and not somebody who's just going to be a flash in the pan. So this could be the Grand Slam that we look back on 5 years ago saying that this is when Bouchard really emerged on the national and the global stage of tennis. And, she's now a sustained top 10 threat kind of thing. Looking at other surprises, Spain as a country as a whole has done really well. Obviously, Nadal, Federer, Robredo, but then you've had Bautista Agut and her name escapes me, but she beat Caroline Wozniacki and really looks like Anna Ivanovic. Druguru, I think. Gabriela Druguru, I think. So apologize if I made her mispronounced her name. But why are we still surprised that Spain's talent does so well outside of clay, even though it's been now 10 years since Nadal's emergence?
I think the main thing is that even on clay, on the women's side, they've had a great deal of success. I mean, we had Arianta Sanchez Vicario, but then 10 years ago, there wasn't really a top Spanish player. And now we have a lot of top Spanish players in the top 32. I mean, we have David Ferrer, always the third in Grand Slams. Then all the other players you mentioned, on top of Rafa Nadal, who still has the potential to be the undisputed greatest of all time, even though I still think it's Roger Federer. But that's another time, another discussion.
Yeah, I think they've always been around, but the fact that they're so impressive on grass and on hardcore just means that this decade has been the Spanish decade. The Davis Cup success is not a joke. The women's game is finally kind of coming back to the levels it was in the 90s. So I don't think we should be surprised. I think we should celebrate them. And I think they'll always have this many players kind of in play at the start of a round, the second week.
All right. As we move into the second week, what's the storyline you're looking most forward to?
I'm going to be definitely looking at Roger Federer and Andy Murray, two guys who had a lot of question marks going in, have played really well through 3 rounds, 1 win away from facing each other in a 4th round matchup. If that does happen, that matchup should be dynamite. I'm going to be looking for the fact that when they're challenged the first time, like Federer could be challenged by Tsonga next round, how they respond. And I'll also be looking at anything of the winner of that, how they fare against, say, a Nadal in the semifinal. If there is a sustained kind of excellence in them this week.
All right. And what I'm looking forward to, I'm going to take a more patriotic spin. And we mentioned this before. I'm going to go with hashtag Genie's Army. Eugenie Bouchard is going to, we're recording this about 12 a.m. So she's going to play her 12 a.m. Eastern time, and she's going to play a match at 3 a.m. So I'm hoping by the time this podcast gets out there, she hasn't lost her match. So because I really hoping that she can go deep in this tournament. I mean, that Ana Ivanovic took out Serena Williams, one of the most formidable players in this tournament. So I think Bouchard played really good against Lauren Davis, 6-2, 6-2 in the previous round. So doing that against a similar ranking, who's she playing again?
Casey Delacqua.
Yeah, Casey Delacqua. I think she'll be able to bring it out really strong against her and move on to the next round and then be able to challenge any of the other seeded players, even though she is ranked at 31. So I think I'm really hoping this will be a big breakthrough for Eugenie Bouchard.
Okay, we'll see. That match will be 7 o'clock Eastern, Australian time on Rod Laver Arena. We're nearing the end of this edition of the Urban Tennis Podcast, but like always, we like to end with certain games. This week, we're going to do tennis roulette, and specifically, we're going to pick a year in Australian Open history through our randomizer, and we've selected 1980. So just the start of the 80s. We had, on the men's side, Brian Teacher. Brian Teacher of the United States. Winning his first and only Grand Slam. On the women's side, we had Hannah Mandalkova winning her first of 4 Grand Slams. We had definitely an interesting divide here. This was an era where many of the top men still didn't make the trip to Australia, just where it landed on the calendar. Remember, it used to be played in November, December. Not the January we're used to. So there was no John McEnroe. There was no Bjorn Borg. And on the women's side, Martina Navratilova was here, but she did lose in the semis. And it would be not until 1981 that she would win her first Australian Open. So bring in my co-host again. Any recollections, impressions, thoughts on 1980 in Australian Open history?
Looking at the list of seeded men's players, I only recognize Ivan Lendl, so I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, I think it was a different era. Just compare it to today when everybody considers the Australian Open on par with the other slams. That was not the case back then. Moving on, our social media highlight of the week. We've mentioned it a couple of times, but definitely hashtag Genie's Army, started by a bunch of Aussies, has taken Twitter. Whenever matches are announced, hashtag Genie's Army is on the Twitter pages, on Facebook. Tennis Canada has picked up the cause. So it's a great grassroots movement that has spread across social media. Once again, thanks for listening. You can find us on SoundCloud, YouTube, backrowsports.com. This is the first time we're doing a podcast in the middle of a Grand Slam, something we like to continue doing to give you the feel of what's happening in a slam one weekend. We'll be back next weekend after the clouds have settled and we know our champions. So thank you for listening. Episode 17, Melburned.
Who's hot, who not? Tell me who rock, who sell out in the store. You tell me who flop, who copped a new drop, who jewels got rocks, who else making rap albums doing numbers like it's pop. Same old pimp, Drake, you know ain't nothing changed with these funny style niggas we done put on in the game. I just asked for some blessings at my grandmother's grave, then it's back to LA, open the mail, staring at the check. Enough to make you throw up, man, it's gross what I net. I'm with my whole set, tennis matches at the crib. I swear I could be Serena when she playing with her left. Oh,